Welcome to Philly Coco Presents Side Project Spotlight, Episode 12. This is a developer's journey to making cool stuff. We are your co-pilots on this merry voyage. I'm Kotaro.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Aaron.
And we are Philly Coco, a Philadelphia-based Cocoa Heads community focused on Apple development. That primarily, but not exclusively, means iOS, Mac, tvOS, and watchOS development. Philly Coco's prime directive is to help you along your own development journey. Whew.
We did it.
We did it. All right. Little tweaks, but...
Today we're really leaning into not exclusively.
Yes, we are. We have a guest for once. First time, actually. Our guest today is Arpit Mathur. I'm pronouncing it right. He is an organizer for what was once Android Alliance of Philadelphia, now known as Google Developer Group, and that's how I know him. He's a very big member of the Philadelphia tech community, and welcome on board, Arpit.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to expound upon that or anything else we should know about you.
I can give a brief introduction. My name's Arpit. I've been in Philadelphia for the last 16 years, which is really funny because growing up, I moved all over. My parents had a job that moved them all over the country. So this is the longest I've been in one city ever. I work for Comcast Labs as a principal engineer, which is a fun position where we kind of work on a bunch of emerging technologies. So in that space, I've played with virtual reality, chatbots, some machine learning and AI stuff, a lot of blockchain stuff. I try to be pretty present for the Philadelphia blockchain community, which is small but a passionate group of folks there. And I help organize Philly Google Developers Group, which is all things Google Dev, which has lately been a lot of Flutter and Firebase and the new Android OS that's come out and a whole lot of stuff. So yeah, it's fun.
Cool. Well, I was thinking that I was just trying to remember when our first time meeting, and I was pretty sure it was Android Alliance at the time. What's changed in that sort of sphere in because now it's Google Development Group, so it kind of encapsulates a lot of Google technology.
Yeah, Android Alliance was a fun inception, and one of those desperately needed kind of moments when Android first launched. This was about 10 years ago, probably a little bit more than that. And it launched with very few guidelines. Compared to what the iOS or the iPhone launch, Android felt kind of shot without enough kind of documentation or anything. So myself, there used to be an Android developer at Comcast, Corey Ladislaw, who's now in UK, and but was a big champion, a big name in the local tech circles as well. We were both talking about it once. We were we don't know what we're doing. There's not enough documentation to figure out what we're doing. and there were a bunch of people who were feeling the same pain. So we just created this group. And I remember the first sessions were so educational. But you had folks who were coming in and you're well, this is how I'm doing design. This is how I'm doing this particular thing. Did you know Android has the style system? And every session was very enlightening. And so we ran that as Android Philly for about, I would say 4 to 5 years. And by that time, Android evolved and got a lot more. And so we became more about best practices as opposed to any functioning practice. And then around 5-ish years ago, I think, we became Google. I don't know if GDG was around that time. That's when Google Developer Group is basically Google's program for developer organizations across the country, across the world. And so I think it made sense for us to kind of reach out and be hey, there is an Android community. We would love to have your speakers and sponsorships and those kinds of things. So we kind of aligned with that program, which has been pretty good and has broadened the mandate for sure. So we now have talks. We still, I think, primarily would talk about mobile development around Android, but we've had a lot of talks around Firebase, web, a lot of some talks around Angular or the new web technologies. Google's pushing web dev pretty prominently. So a bunch of things around that and so on. So yeah, so that's kind of the story. We're now mostly a virtual group. Like we haven't had post-pandemic, we haven't really met up since then, but we do virtual events every month, and we have a Slack group where we kind of talk about stuff. So I'd love to have folks join in if you want to join one more Slack group and talk about Google.
Because of the name changes, like how do people find the group? What is it actually officially called now?
I think the easiest way, I think it's Google Developer Group or GDG Philadelphia on Twitter is probably the best way to get it. Like, let me just yeah, and that links out to our Slack group, and the Slack group has a self-invite link, so you can just kind of invite yourself through that. But yeah, if you go to at GDG Philadelphia on Twitter, that would be a good place to kind of.
I noticed that you are experimenting with Spaces, Twitter Spaces.
Yeah.
How's that been going? And
good. Yeah. So that came about from a need. So post pandemic, as we became virtual, we definitely lost the kind of occasional person. A couple of things happened. We not only did we go virtual, but we also moved off of Meetup because Google kind of asked all their groups to coordinate through this other program that they've licensed, and so we lost the kind of accidental traffic or the folks who would just come upon the events out of this thing, and pizza is always a good attractor to bring folks in.
Oh yeah, we know.
It is.
so
shout out to you, Pizza Pro.
Inside jokes on the podcast that no one will get. Always fun.
Yeah, I might have some inclination on that one, but yeah, we decided to kind of so what happened with the group was that we became a smaller group of very regular meetups. So it became there's great bonding among the folks that show up regularly, but it is a much smaller group. And so Twitter Spaces was kind of an attempt to kind of break out of our own bubble and kind of get into kind of like the kind of traffic wherever traffic is, and hopefully get some folks who didn't even know that we existed and just call in. And that's worked pretty well. I mean, we've had maybe 3 sessions so far on Twitter Spaces, and it works well for the kind of conversational sessions that we have. I think like our next meeting, we do want to go back to, because I think it's going to be an actual technical presentation. So I think we might go back to like our Zoom or Google Google Meet account, just so that we can screen share and so on. But for I think we had a couple of conversations on accelerating development. So like what people are using to what kind of tooling and things of that nature, and just like learning and getting learning new things was another session topic. So those have been pretty good, and I think we'll continue going forward. I really loved it. It's a bit of it does involve some kind of. I thought it would be a lot more passive, like Google Meet events or Zoom events. You turn them on and it kind of hands off for a while. With Twitter Spaces, there is a bit of who wants to speak, because you can only get 10 speakers on the kind of dais at a time. So if you have 20 odd folks who come in, you're trying to balance who do you want to speak now, and and so on. So there's a bit of a dance there, but otherwise I think we enjoyed it.
So is that long term? Do you intend to sort of add that as a sort of supplement for regular meetups? Or
I think so. I think for the goal that we had with it, to get folks who didn't even know about GDG Philadelphia or just wanted to jump in for a little bit because the topic was interesting, not because they wanted to be with, be identified as a GDG Philadelphia person. I think for that, it's been good. We've had some new folks who came in just because they found us one day browsing Twitter and we were having a conversation. So I think we'll continue that. I think we're still figuring out what the balance of that versus the regular meetups is. Is this something we do in addition to the meetup? So maybe we meet physically or meet on Zoom once a month, but also have one or two Twitter hangouts, Twitter Spaces. Mm-hmm. So we don't know. We're still figuring that part out. But we are looking and if anyone has ideas or have best practices in that space or something that's worked with their group, I would love to hear.
I've never used the Twitter Spaces. I have lurked on was it Clubhouse? Is that the other app?
Yeah,
that
that's
inspired us a little bit, but never participated in any of them. Is it similar to how Clubhouse works? And also, is it open to everybody now? Because I think I remember you mentioning this some time ago, and it was like a feature that I didn't think I could even access.
Yeah. So it's exactly, or I shouldn't say exactly, but very close to Clubhouse. Clubhouse's model. The couple of things that tripped us around Twitter Spaces was web access, because till very recently, like you couldn't. So even now, you can join a Twitter Space if you're browsing Twitter on the web, but you can't speak. So to speak, you have to be on one of their native mobile apps.
Right.
So and I don't even know if like web was even listening was a capability for a while. So that was like one moment that tripped us up. But yeah, otherwise it's very Clubhouse inspired. And like there's a bunch of them now. Like last year I was doing one of my research areas was synthetic voice, this machine generated speech and so on. And we just did it took stock of that whole space. There was a lot of there's just a Twitter, Spotify has something called Green Room or something. Instagram's has added it. So there's just voice meetings is like this thing now.
Well, if it's a useful feature, then the fact that it's on all these other platforms means you can use it on the platform where your audience is. And in terms of meetups, I mean, I think being on Twitter makes a lot of sense because for technical meetups, right? That's kind of the default social media platform for software developers in this space. I think.
I'm actually surprised. Every once in a while, I'll take a look at Philadelphia software devs who are on Twitter, and I know so many devs who are fantastic, but and they do have Twitter handles, but they're not very active.
Well, that's like me.
Not active.
I have a handle. I don't really post much of anything. I mean,
yeah,
that's because it's Twitter, and there's
the moment you have a strong a hot opinion about anything, right?
Yeah.
Like it goes back to I think there was this comedian Michelle Wolf who had joked about Twitter, and she felt that Twitter was this glorified whatever the character limit is now to something character manifesto, right? Like you're just throwing hot takes on the wall constantly, and they're kind of meant to be ephemeral, but somebody's going to bring that dirt back up 2 years from now and say, well, you said this, and as your counter argument to your hot take that you take now.
So I can understand why if people just don't want to deal with trying to do the moderation tools around that to keep their interactions useful.
I would love I'm curious if there's going to be GitHub Spaces or Stack Overflow Spaces.
Oh, there you go. That would be interesting because then you could maybe be easier to have a conversation around a specific piece of code.
Right.
Which now I guess you could do that, but you'd have to use Zoom or something in order to show the slides. Right. I don't know if GitHub could make it a better experience in some way, but I don't know. I think there's room for experimentation in the space on how to do a virtual meetup and for us specifically in the realm of software development.
It's weird, right? Because you have all these sort of specific one of the nice things about space is you're not seeing the people, right? So you're just trying to
one of the nice things. I don't have to see you.
Well, I mean, I get the point of you want to share code, right? You want to do some sort of pseudo screen share,
right?
Although doing that on a phone is probably going to be crazy impossible. But I think the conversational component, right? It's almost like having a group chat telephone call back in the day, if people remember that term. But it's just this way to have nice conversation. A really good example would be a really good topic would be a lot of times we get this conversation about getting a job in the iOS community or mobile development or just programming in general, right? And everybody has a fairly not strong opinion, but a good advice, I should say. And right, that's useful. And even in a broader context, if you have a topic that specifically talks about getting a gig or getting a job, getting your first job in Android development, what do you need to do, right? What are the steps? What are the people we get that constantly, really, in terms of people who come in and they don't know where to start, they don't know how to, what tools they need. So I think that that's one of the things that would make a great topic for spaces.
People don't always want to show their faces, which I think what you meant when you don't have to see people, like, and not everyone's comfortable being on camera, and that's perfectly fine. So, and the whole spaces concept, the reason I liked it with Clubhouse, and I said I lurked there, is because I just wanted to listen in on some of the conversations that were being had there among people that seemed interesting, and it's kind of built for that. It's perfectly fine and acceptable for you to just go in there and just listen, and then drop out when you want to.
Yeah,
and there's no friction involved with that, and that was very nice about it.
Well, Slack, and I think at work we've kind of heavily transitioned towards the huddle idea that Slack introduced.
I don't know what that is.
So
maybe it's only on the paid plans.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Definitely on the paid plan. I don't think it's we're in the same kind of boat with our Slack.
Okay, what's a Slack huddle?
I think it's like Slack's answer to Discord.
Is it? Well, no, but like it doesn't do video. It doesn't do camera. It does like screen share, right? Like, so you can actually have a voice chat with screen share. I think that's kind of, at least that's how we're using it. It's like somebody wants to discuss a topic, you're like, all right, I'm still kind of in my pre-showered like work from home state, so I can start a huddle.
So it lets you do like a voice chat and screen share in a group. Okay,
I tried Slack's voice chat. Like if I want to call you, Arpit, for like, hey, I have this idea. Can I like run it by you? Trying to do just a one-to-one voice, like video chat on Slack is horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's borderline as bad as Teams.
Oh God, Teams.
In any case, but now that we have a decent sense of who you are, we now would like to know about your side project, which was now an actual app, but the app is called Grocery Timer. You can find it at GroceryTimer.app. And if you can expound upon, Arpit, the genesis of this idea and kind of like how you went about building it.
Yeah, I mean, this is a classic case of a tool that you want for yourself, and then it's the slippery slope into like adding one more feature, and then by the time you kind of package the final mobile build, it's like been like 8 months or whatever. But yeah, like Grocery Timer started like May-ish of last year, I think. I just wrapped up some projects at work and just kind of tired. I wanted like a mental cleanser. And I've been doing I've done a few projects in Flutter before, and I was really enjoying it. And I was like, oh, I want something the pain point was that, like every once in a while, we'd open the fridge and go like, wait, we bought mushrooms? When did we buy mushrooms? Like, oh man, like I should totally, I'm glad we have spinach, and I know it's about to go bad, so Wednesday we're making this thing. And then, Friday go like, oh man, that kind of thing. So it was basically like a way to keep track of like what was in my fridge and when it was about to go bad. And I visually, like mentally, I was just like, oh, it makes sense. Like I just have this like kind of timer going. I'd say like, okay, I bought, mushrooms today and they go bad in 2 weeks. So like how far into that life cycle am I? And so like I built like the first version. I was like, it's easy, right? You have a shopping list, you swipe, you add it to a timer, and then you're good.
It's easy. I can do it in a weekend.
Yeah,
right. It's always it's always how it starts.
And then like and then the fly in the ointment started coming up. It's like the first version kind of worked, and then I was like, oh man, I hate putting the time for every item. Like the first version was like you swipe it into the timer section, and then it would pop up this thing like how many days, And I was like, okay, like this is getting annoying. And even when you kind of what it does is like and this capability even right now, this is how it does. If it doesn't have information about something, like let's say, and it's fun, like I'll add a bunch of Indian food and there's no data around that kind of cuisine.
I've been looking for data, nutrition data and stuff about Indian dishes, and I can't find any reliable information. I was confused. So apparently it's not just my lack of Google food.
It's definitely, and like I think like as with a lot of things, like data sets around American behaviors are a lot better curated than the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. And so it would like pop up these kind of notifications, and I was like, oh, this is annoying. I wish I could just auto-populate at least as much as I can. And then,
Right.
and then my wife was like, also like shelf times are different in like fridge versus pantry, and you might put something in it. Like chicken in the freezer will last much longer than chicken in the fridge. I was like, that's true. So I have to have a location setting. And then like I found the USDA's like Food Safety and Inspection Service or Information Service, FSIS, and they actually have a data set for a lot of the food items. So I pulled that into the app. And I was like, all right, well, the 2-month project is now 4 months long. It's still okay. And then when we started using it, we started dog fooding it, and it didn't have like a synced list idea. Like, so I wouldn't build my own shopping list, and my wife would do her own, and then we'd be like, wait, did you add this? Who's managing this? Who's in control? Like, all right. And all the data is saved on a Firebase data. A Firestore database. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. But a couple of weeks, I can probably have some flow that points both users onto the same document. And of course, that was another like month and a half. And so that flow is really complex from an engineering point of view. Like going from you start out with individual lists and send an invite, and then accept an invite, and then point to the same list, but then you can leave the list. There's just so many kind of features there. So that became another couple of months. So yeah, and then like testing and all that. So it was an 8-month slippery slope, but I'm glad it's out there.
So this was an 8-month side project. You spent maybe, if you were to say like average time per week.
Yeah. So I mean it wax and wane, but I would say like a couple of nights a week, and then like Saturdays would be maybe a little bit more, like maybe 3 nights a week, and then like some hours on the weekend. It's definitely time intensive.
When you were building this, because you've obviously built it in Flutter.
Yeah.
Not obviously, but you built it in Flutter with the intention to deploy for iOS and Android.
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk me through sort of like the sort of development tooling you were using, and that you're willing to, of course.
Sure.
And sort of why the motivations behind using Flutter versus native or even React Native.
Sure. So I've built a couple of like apps in cross-platform tools before, and they've always kind of been pretty terrible. I got burned by React Native a while back, and I've heard it's gotten a lot better now, but like it's still, the scar is still there, so I kind of twitch a little bit when that comes in. Flutter has been actually generally fun to play with. I like building, like it has kind of a nice, like I really enjoyed Dart as a programming language, and the framework is very similar to Swift UI or Jetpack Compose and Android and React, which is like that kind of declarative, code, but also this idea of like complexity built by composing like simpler widgets together. So like if you were doing Android like a while back, like if your vision for what your app looked like aligned with Google's vision of what the apps on their platform should look like you were okay. But if you wanted to break out of the box, it was just like painful. And so the new world where like you say, hey, you want a horizontal list inside a vertical list inside another horizontal group of containers, that's not that big a deal. You're not like, nobody will yell at you for being like, oh, this is a very heavy component, don't do that. So anyway, so Flutter, like I do enjoy that, and my ecosystem of friends and family was like diverse. Like we have, having run Android Philly and GDG Philly, like I have a bunch of Android devices. Although my main phone right now is an iPhone, but my family is all on Android. So it just made sense to try a cross-platform toolkit. And then the other interesting thing with what's happening with Flutter was that, from the technology point of view, yes, but I didn't introduce this part in my bio, but I used to be a Flash developer way back, right? Like that was like my thing, and I still have very strong.
Whoa.
I know. Like
that's hardcore. That's a dedicated hardcore group, by the way.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, so like, and I don't know, like it gets a lot of black eyes because it definitely wasn't as performant.
Awesome at the time. I mean,
Yeah.
a black eye in retrospect, but man, I remember how cool Flash was.
Yeah, and so like so that when Flash died, that community exploded, right, or imploded or whatever. Like some folks moved to JavaScript, some folks moved to Android development. But I'm seeing like a lot of the Flash people I used to follow back then, and some of the big design houses are now moving towards Flutter, and so that community and that ethos is kind of getting into Flutter as well. If you look at their kind of showcase site, like every app is very different, and they're pushing this idea of like animations and transitions and all that. So to me, that's exciting. So yeah, that's kind of
I mean,
why
is it
Flutter.
safe to sort of think of Flutter? I mean, the way I think of Flutter similar to the way I think of SwiftUI, and not having touched Flutter as much as SwiftUI. I feel like the expressiveness of doing UI is a lot easier in those frameworks. Like again, like you said, you're not constrained by like whatever Apple's human interface guides in our world would say. Like the nav bar needs to be this high and the text needs to be this style, and it's like, no, you want that nav bar red and gradient and flashy and sparkling and do all kinds of weird absurd things. Yeah, go ahead. It's your life. So
yeah, I think I'm with you, and I do a fair bit of I've done a fair bit of Swift UI work as well as some Jetpack Compose work. And my experience with all of these is actually kind of similar, where you kind of like, the components are very easy to put together, and you're having a very productive moment until at some point you're like, wait, I just want this to. There'll be that one thing that you like they didn't think about, and now you're down this rabbit hole of like, wait, what is happening?
That's also the experience with SwiftUI. It's just like, oh, I'm doing great. Then, oh God, I have to do something simple that they didn't account for. Oh no!
I think anything that requires scrolling, nested nav view, deeply nested ones have really weird behaviors. Keyboard interactions have very weird behaviors. On focus is very weird. If you're doing anything tvOS related, particularly, you're trying to get cute. Like I was like, yeah, no.
SwiftUI doesn't like you getting cute with it. It just,
I mean, it's fine. Getting cute means like doing like Z layers of like stacks of cards and then like animating and dragging, doing something funky with that. The moment you're like something simple, like, okay, I need to create a long list of horizontal scrollable horizontal cards with images that are asynchronously loading but not caching. Stuff like that. That tends to be sort of the hilarious disconnect in some ways. So yeah, it goes back to that 90% to the 10%, right?
Yeah.
There was another indie dev, I forget which account it was, but I think like saw some tweet that went like, I needed to just my view controller just needed a rounded corners and some kind of this thing, and so now I had to rewrite the entire view controller logic or something like that.
Oh, dude. I mean, it's weird because like I'm at the situation where I will build something in SwiftUI, and for the most part, like something that in UIKit might take a fair bit of time, maybe 2 to 3 days of just regular work hours or whatever, like would take one day, maybe even less, because it's just like such rapid fire, like hot top, just building the rounded edges, the drop shadow. You're not diving into core animation or core layer or core graphics layer at all. You're just it's just right there. If I want to do like a layout where like 3 cards are stacked on each other but like offset by like 10 points, it's like, yeah, no problem, we got this. One line of code, one line of modifier. It's crazy.
It's the declarative nature that makes that possible, which is really cool.
You want to blend mode that so like it's multiplied. You want to change that blend mode dynamically. You want like fancy gradients that dynamically change in real time. Yeah, we got it. One line of code, done. It's just like the absurdity of SwiftUI and to some extent Flutter, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's just like what I sympathize or empathize with like the dev teams though, because they're like basically building a toolkit for the entire world. So there's always going to be like that one person who goes like, well, actually, I really wanted my text to flip when that thing happened, or like I can't really do that. And you're like, all right, we'll add it regardless. But
I mean, I think I was saying this earlier, maybe before we started recording, but like Swift UI lets me build decent UIs, and I'm not a great UI designer or have the training for it. So I like that approach about these declarative frameworks. If you're really squarely in that 80%, 90% box that they are handling well for you, then it's great. But you guys have much more experience with custom UI, though, right? So how much of a struggle is it to break out of that box? It sounds like it's not as bad with Flutter as maybe.
So two reasons why that's happening, right? One is like I think if you look at Google's design language with material design, I think they did a good job. But what happened was material became too almost rigid. Like I don't know if this was, I'm pretty sure this wasn't by design, but the community looked at guidelines and looked at them as rules. And so like every third-party app just looked, I shouldn't say every, but a lot of third-party apps just looked like material designs out of the box. And in the community, the discussions used to be, well, you changed that thing a little bit, so now you're no longer material. Being like 100% material was almost like a badge of honor. And that led to in the Android community just a lot of apps that, like, for me personally, I was like, I'm bored. Like, this looks exactly like, there were like a bunch of Twitter clients that looked exactly the same, and I was like, well, what's the point? Like, why? Yeah.
That's what it was like in iOS too for a good chunk of time, right? It was the focus, like, we got to make it look like Apple's apps, and then iOS 7, I remember, like, that was a big design change, and you'd have all these apps trying to do the same kinds of effects, and and I mean, I think there's design trends and fads that happen in the community.
Getting into that point, I know like your app design is quite different in terms of its personality. I'm kind of curious because I'm trying to think of like what it reminds me of, but it has a very flat but expressive kind of design language. It uses its own special font. It trends away from aside from the basic iconography, or it doesn't do any real imagery. There's no photos embedded. There's nothing to like really express, really go crazy with like the graphics, for lack of a better word. So what was that inspiration, and sort of what was the driving point of that?
I mean, a part of it was just like there were definitely some apps that I really enjoyed using, or just really looked at. And Philly has a good community of like really well designed apps. I would say like I think like Russ's Happy Scale and Curtis's Slopes app were definitely like if you look at them and they kind of they spent a lot of time and effort polishing them up. But and then there were like other community apps. Like there was an app called Hello Bother, I think by a dev named Dan Gunther or something like that, and he just did it's an app around like roommates coordinating, like just telling your roommate that I'm too busy or something, and so
leave me alone.
Yeah, leave me alone. And he just did a really good job with like the visuals and the thing. So a lot of it was just inspired from like other apps, and like I don't think. I mean, we're all like, if you're designing your own thing, you pick like 100 inspiration, then you don't want to blatantly copy anything, but you can be inspired by many things. So, yeah, I don't know if there was a conscious, like, I would really like this app to follow this, or like, there wasn't a big marching on. It was just a series of like, well, I want the progress bars on a flat background, but the background, I don't want it to be white because that's kind of boring. So I want to make it like, this cream color, and then like, oh, what works well with that? I just look at like different designs that have used that as the base color and seen what colors pop on that. And typography was again like very like try and see like, this kind of looks nice. So
oh, that's cool. So not a conscious application of like design concepts or training you had previously, but more of a
for my side projects, it's just like it's like a weird process where I kind of go to like Sketch or Adobe XD or something. I'll do like the first pass, or like I'll do like the first couple of screens, and then I'll like code it in Flutter, and I'll be like, well, like this doesn't look right. So I'll just change it in Flutter, and then I'll make those changes. Then I'll go from Flutter or to the design comps, right, and then fix it there. And so it's like this weird iterative process, which definitely leads you to some like terrible places too, because there have been times like there's like you kind of build something because like you were in the flow and you built the whole feature out, and now you're like, well, this is not really working. I can design it, and I should probably go back to design. There's going to be a lot of dead code in this, because I'll have to redesign the whole thing. So it's not something I would like recommend, but it works for me just because like it's a side project, and I'd rather have it functional fast than like have it like perfectly designed and then have the dev cycle.
Yeah, I've been playing around with using Swift UI for that in that kind of way. Just go in there and iterate in Swift UI, and not so much upfront design things in Sketch or something like that. Which I think probably works best if you know that you're not going to be trying to make really custom design, or if you just know how to implement the thing in your head, because you'll run into issues if it's really custom. But it works for, especially for prototyping, really great for that, just to see if a concept even works at all.
There is like one aspect of this app where like I would say if the app is really simple to use, but there's one step that is cognitively complex, right? Like the idea of like, okay, you bought you have a shopping list, and you say, okay, I go to the store, you're like, I'm done, right? Now I need you to define where you're going to store it, because like you bought chicken, but did you put the chicken in the fridge or the freezer? And or if you bought like, I don't know, in my case, like some coriander chutney, well, I have no idea how long that takes. I need you to like tell me for the first time at least. And so that flow took like, I would say there are like 4 different implementations of that flow. Like the first version was a pop-up that then like popped up another pop-up, and I was like, oh, this is too much. Like I like, it's fine if I have to do it once, but I have to do it for every item. Mm-hmm. And so like I would say if this was being done with a team with more resources, like that would be an area to prototype like 4 or 5 different prototypes to just go through that interaction flow. But like my learning experience was build one version, dog food it, go like, this is not working, go back to the drawing board, build another version. So that was
how much. So aside from you and your wife, I assume, was there anybody else that was dog fooding it with you? Gave any really good feedback? Or
not for a long time. I think like towards the end, around Jan was when I kind of like shared like the betas out to a few folks. I have a couple of friends who I lean on their kind of experience and advice like quite a bit from a design point of view. Surprisingly, because I was in the UX team at Comcast for a couple of years, but I feel like I have like more friends who are in the design team or former design team. They're all designers. I have more designer friends than I have engineer friends sometimes, and it's interesting. You can go down like it's interesting to see the difference in cultures there, but that does help me when I'm like designing something like this. I go like, oh, here, send it to a bunch of people, and they can tell you very honestly, this part sucks and this part works well. So I had a couple of friends who kind of gave me some good advice. But the thing with advice again is that everyone's trying to be nice, so nobody says, hey, this part is kind of terrible. They will tell you to like, maybe this is something you can try, and so you have to kind of keep a keep an ear out for something that they might say politely, that you're like, okay, this is if he's saying it, like it probably is a bit of a problem. But yeah, like there were a couple of friends who sent some good feedback, but otherwise it was mostly like of me and my wife.
And how it is, because I remember you talking about it in Side Project Saturday.
Yeah.
About she was sort of the arbiter of like whether or not this is shippable or not, right?
Yeah. So it was great to have that. And this is like, I'm sure there's a high level statement of like, designing with customers, like, and not just living in your own bubble. Because I would say like once it got out there, like and it's still like, I have maybe like 100 installed right now, so the jury's still out. But so far, like about the 2 features that people resonated most with, which is one was the ability to pull the recipes from a website, right? So it includes
Yeah.
that aspect, because you think of it as like this holy trinity of like of experience of interactions where you have food that you want to make that requires ingredients that you need to shop for that then have to be in the fridge and track for how long to hold on to. And I was like, there are like so many different recipe tracking apps out there. I was like, I'm not going to like, look, for MVP, I don't need it, blah blah blah. And she's like, I'm not using it if we're not doing that. It's too much effort. Just do it. And thankfully, I found some code and guidelines that made that possible. So recipe import and shared lists, right? Sharing it with somebody would never have happened if I kind of did it by myself. And these were those like kick in the butt. Like I was like, I don't read. This is MVP. We have to ship first and then iterate. They're like, no, you gotta get this one in, otherwise I'm not using it. And I was like, all right. So I would say that was a really good direction, because like fast forward today, like I think those are the ones that people find very useful. So.
And so now you use it daily, or
yeah, definitely the big part of definitely. I would say like you kind of hyper focus on your app for sure, and but I am very well aware of my fridge status right now, and any given day you can quiz me on my fridge and I'll tell you. But yeah, like I think it works well for us. Like makes shopping runs productive, functional. A lot of times, like we weren't very organized. Like, why are we buying this? Like, what? Like, let's buy mushrooms. Why? I don't know. When did we last buy mushrooms? I don't know. I'm sure we need mushrooms. I don't know why mushrooms seem to be that go to example or vegetable here, but yeah, like we use it pretty regularly, and like the alerts are pretty useful. I think there's still things that I want to do with the alerts. Like right now, it just tells you like the day before, like your timer is about to hit. Like it says, hey, FYI, right? Your spinach was bought like 3 weeks ago, and probably should be warned. But I think
be warned.
Yeah,
don't eat your spinach.
Yeah,
it's probably liquid now.
It's soggy mess. And hopefully, well, it's supposed to tell you before it becomes a soggy mess. But you get that one notification. But I think like I might want to, and you can snooze them too. So you can say, okay, like remind me tomorrow, or remind me in a week, or whatever. But I do want to like tweak that a little bit, because I will get it often at like some inappropriate time. Like it'll be like, oh, I'm hanging out with my friends at like you can decide what time you want it, but it's not very contextual to what you're doing. So there's
there's that culture. What's that iOS mechanism called? You can kind of tell the system, when to prompt you with notifications and stuff. Isn't there like to train it?
Local notification, or
no? Isn't there? There's like isn't there a mechanism to train it to when to show stuff?
Yeah, you have to like donate it to Siri.
That's right. Donating. I don't know if that's relevant or not. If that's something, but that's a iOS specific thing. And I wonder if using Flutter, what kind of like access does it give you to those types of real more platform specific APIs?
Yeah, like it's like React Native. I think it's like it does like Flutter just thinks of the app as something that's launched in a window. Anything beyond that, you can write. But what happens when you compile a Flutter app? It generates an iOS project, right? And so that iOS project, you can do whatever you want. So one of the next things I want to add is like widgets, for because like I like to see on my iOS home screen like how things are going or whatever. And
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, widgets are fun.
Yeah, it's like so many apps you install and they're kind of useful, and then they go out of sight, out of mind. They're like in this wall of apps somewhere. So like having a widget would be useful. But yeah, like it's possible, but there's some hoops to jump through. Thankfully, like the data that I'm saving is so simple. I don't have it's not a complex relational database. It's just like, what it is and what the kind of like how many days, what is the end date. I can take the top 5, put them in shared defaults or some kind of easily accessible storage, and then use the widget to kind of pull from there.
Do you have to do that part native, or how does that work?
Yeah, that part would be a pretty native widget.
And then that means you would have to, because you're using Firebase as sort of like your backend in general. How does that work in terms of like when you export the project? and then you have to sort of, when you export that project updates. You can override the current project, right? Does it create a new project, or are you overriding when you do your update to your Flutter app, that copies into the new project or updates the current project, and then you do all your changes there?
Right. So there's a kind of a shell iOS project that the first time you say Flutter in it, or whatever the initialization command is for a Flutter project, like it will generate an iOS app, it'll generate an Android app with the bindings, and then like it'll create in a lib folder where all of your code and visuals have to go. So the Firebase, so every time I launch the app, it goes out, fetches the data from Firebase, and then says, here are the top 5 things that, whatever, like it sorts it in an ascending order and puts it on the list. So right now the conversation is between the Flutter app and the Firebase API. It doesn't really persist anything on the device. So what I'll have to do for widget support is like take the data I loaded the last time, save it to user shared defaults, I think, whatever that
default.
with NS defaults, like so. And it's a bunch of keys and values, right? So it's not really going to be, hopefully, famous last words, but hopefully that part's not going to be like that hard. And then from my understanding, then I'll have to just tweak the the iOS app to just like widgets from my brief, look into that space is just like they're kind of like their own app anyways. And so it should work, but that's
they're their own target, and they have very specific ways you can update them.
Yeah, and that's like the interesting idea with like both iOS apps and Android apps is like now the app package is like a container for many apps, right? You can have your watch app, your widget, your extension, all of them kind of compiled into this one package. So Flutter only targets one thing, which is that app that will launch when the user opens taps on the app icon. But everything else, like you're on your own.
I kind of find it funny, like as much as we talk about the, how useful widgets can be, there's not a lot of apps that have widgets on them, right? Like you would think a company, like the NBA is a really good example. The NBA app is a fine app-ish. it's a serviceable app. Great app in many ways. Problem with it, so like one thing is like I don't want to go into the app constantly to check on the score, right? I would like a widget to just show me the team scores, like whatever team is playing, just show it to me in a widget.
Yeah.
They don't have that.
Right.
I don't know why. It's like it's such an easy win in my mind because I'm like, look, you can take up, anywhere from like whatever the size of the app. The widget takes up like what 3 apps, 4 app sizes, or like the smallest widget can take up a huge chunk of screen real estate. With your NBA logo, you take up a chunk of home screen real estate right there. If you can get the widget in there, I don't understand why big companies don't do that by default. It just
I'd love to kind of see like Apple's kind of data on how many customers put widgets on their home screen. Like it might be that it's a very alpha user use case, like where like most people forget that there are widgets. And
I mean, I kind of forget. I don't have a lot. I have like Happy Scale, as we mentioned. On there, I have like the Photos widget, and that's about it. I might have one other one. I don't have a lot, but some people I've seen their home screens are full of widgets.
If I was to look at my I have like a page dedicated, and it's actually the home page dedicated to Overcast, weather, the time app, notes, and calendar. And granted, that's not optimal in my mind. I'm still tweaking that. I feel like that's a kind of a young person kind of thing.
Have you seen the when widgets were first available? You see the crazy designs that people came up with. That was like a little trend for a while.
Yeah. The Widgetsmith stuff.
Yeah.
But to me, I'm like, it strikes me as much more of a young person thing to do, to use widgets. And so any media company who values the 18 to 49 demographics should be thinking about this as an opportunity, less than as like, I have to build this extension.
I mean, here's my problem with it. I think a lot of people may not be aware of the widgets or understand how to put them on the screen and use them. Like when I've added widgets, sometimes they're just confusing, and that's because of Apple's like limited ways that you can interact with them and set them up, and it can be confusing sometimes depending on the type of widget it is. And the whole UI is not the smoothest experience if you are not at all familiar with the concept or you're not a real technical person. I can definitely see you having problems just at first anyway, understanding what is a widget, how does this work, or like the whole thing where you have to tap it and you have to open up the backside of the widget to make adjustments or something. It's very kind of awkward, and it's very different than any other flow you'd have in the app. So I think there's some friction there that they need to work on at a platform level to make it easier for people to add, remove, manage their widgets in some scenarios.
I've also seen a lot of like just bad widgets. I think I was using. I'm not gonna name names here, but like a couple of apps I was using. I was like, oh, I think it's just some list management app, right? Like let's say, and I was like, oh, I just want this list on my home screen, and I look up and they're like, they do have widgets. I'm like, that's great, and the widget is like, add item to list. It's
like a
button that generically open like the thing. I'm like, that's not the fast action I'm looking for. I just want to see that thing.
Yeah.
And iOS, it's really limited what they can do. They can only update so often, and they're pretty static.
Same with Android. Like Android got widgets like way back. Right? That was like the one thing that they kind of for a long time Android did. And a lot of people would not move to iOS because they were so obsessive about their kind of widget behavior. Because it is like if that becomes your efficiency thing, then launching an app and doing something is just feels like it's so painful. And
yeah, Notification Center widgets, which was the previous incarnation of widgets on iOS, actually had more functionality, right? Like you could more flexibility, but it was all stuck on the Notification Center area.
Yeah.
So the new widgets can be anywhere, but they're
the way
limited.
I'm looking at widgets is that they're a future product if you can get my drift.
Yes, they are.
I mean,
think so.
I'm talking like Reality OS specific product.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think a widget. I think once you define, first of all, I think it's a great like kind of like way to kind of think about your app. Like your app may have 20 features, but like what qualifies as a widget feature? Like just like that tells you what's important, right? Like it's just yeah. And then then it becomes like, oh, if I have a widget, well, it makes sense to have it on the watch too, and that's like that's pretty much all the watch can handle. And then like when you go in full immersive and stuff, like I'd love to kind of have like 4 widgets or like important widgets launched with my dashboard, like whatever the dashboard is.
And now you're thinking like an Apple product manager.
There you go.
Right? Oh, they build the widget, then they'll get the watch, then they'll get the Reality OS headset.
I mean, that's the new phone. Somebody was like, we were having this discussion this other time about like what is the future of mobile applications, right? It feels like the last years have been very incremental. And it's like, well, if you think of like mobile as like the kind of the apps on your phone, it's not that much. But like mobile is exploding into this like constellation of experiences, right? Like watches and AirPods and so like I think that's where all the focus is. And that's cool.
So what is the future, since we're talking at that level, at that point, of grocery app, grocery timer, and yourself in that sense? So now that you've officially finished V1, congratulations, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah, no, that's great. Like having a V1 out has been pretty awesome. I think so. I have a new build that should be out soon. I'm just testing it, which is just a few bug fixes, and then I have like a laundry list of features that are around. I got some really interesting feedback from folks, right? As of course, like once you get it out there. One thing, for example, was I felt a little this too. Is like, well, just because something is going bad at a particular date, that may not be the date I'm tracking. Like a lot of people will say, hey, like I should eat this by this weekend, right, or something. Or even if it's gone, like even if it's like slightly past its kind of expiration, like all right, remind me Saturday we'll make this. So that might be the date you're tracking. Yeah, and then there are like a bunch of small changes that widgets is going to be a big. I imagine like a little bit of an engineering effort to kind of get that, but I definitely want to make that either. If not, I'm thinking like maybe the next release I'll try to get widgets in there.
For both iOS and Android, or
well, I think I'll start with that with iOS, just because like I have a better idea of like that I've been doing, like I said, like I've been doing a Swift UI a fair bit and looking at widgets for Swift UI for even for work last year. So I have like an understanding of that. An Android widget system is, I think they're doing a revamp a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Android widgets are great, but they've been out there for a while, but they have had they still do a lot of things that like early versions did, and so there's some design not greatness there. And with the new Android design language with Material 2 or Material U, the new design language, and their kind of Android 12 idea of like pulling colors from your home screen and your kind of your, I don't know, have you seen that? But if on Android now, if you set like a wallpaper on your app, the OS samples that wallpaper and then themes all the apps with that color theme, right?
That's cool. Could be cool.
So yeah, no,
could be a disaster.
Well.
Yeah.
No, so I love it. Like and
awesome.
And of course, like the first party apps do that. Including app icons, you can actually set up. I think you can do app icons as well. But third party apps, like you have to kind of get into that API. So I want to see how that works. So that'll be interesting. But that has very big impact on the widgets because so I think that's why I think Android might be like the next version after that. Yeah,
cool. And
very cool.
And so for you yourself, are you thinking about moving? Aside from supporting this project, is there any other side project that's on your mind, or are you sort of still gonna focus your side project work on the grocery upgrades?
Couple of them that are like too amorphous to kind of really define. I still want to so one of the apps I was working on before was this, which we talked about, was this Jax, like this JavaScript chatbot thing, which I want to go back to, which is like an education experience for like adaptive a bot that can teach you programming. I think that idea is still, I'm really think that there is something there. So I want to go back to that. And there are a couple of like projects that are amorphous enough. I'm super excited about them today, but a week from now I might be like, this was a terrible idea. So I don't know how I'm letting them marinate. I'm letting it marinate to see like, okay, like was it the late night seems like genius moment, and then then you go like, well, actually, how would this even work? So I don't know. But right now I'm actually really excited about GroceryTimer. And the thing that I want to learn, which is what I'm sure it's a very common thread among developers with side projects, is like marketing or getting it out there, right? Like how do you like you start digging into it and you find that app marketing is almost an engineering exercise of its own. And Flutter actually enables a lot of, not Flutter, Firebase has a bunch of tools that you can kind of leverage with some thinking around marketing, right? Like for example, push notification. When do you want to notify somebody with a push? Or in-app messaging. When do you want to tell a particular kind of customer, give them some kind of offer? Like maybe somebody who hasn't subscribed to your app but uses it regularly. Like my app currently, for example, has a 10-item limit before it prompts you for subscription. And so if somebody keeps hitting like 9 items and just because like they don't want to pay for whatever reason, is there a different kind of messaging you want to do or anything? So there's a lot of like engineering elements into marketing that I think I'm like curious about. I don't know if I'll be any good at it, but definitely it scratches that engineering itch. Like, it's a variable. How do I?
Well, it sounds like we're gonna have to have you back in the future talk about this stuff, because we didn't even get into the whole back end, how that works in any detail. And marketing is a perennial conversation topic in Philly Coca.
In general, I think indie communities in general, that's always a thing, because we make things, we find it very useful, and then you go like, I'm sure others would, but
I mean, I'm looking at it for other things, non-developer related, other projects and businesses I'm part of, and it's like, marketing is a hard problem in itself that maybe the developer community has not, historically maybe taken it seriously as it should have.
I guess it's kind of an interesting thing, a topic, maybe even in one of your spaces. Marketing as an engineering challenge, right?
Yeah,
that's a good title for a talk too.
Yeah.
We should I'd be down for like doing a kind of a joint Twitter space event. We just talk about this thing, because I'm definitely interested in learning more.
Right.
And does that get recorded, or is it ephemeral?
They just rolled out maybe in the last month or so the ability to record those spaces. So most spaces I've attended in the last so many days have been recorded spaces.
Oh,
Gotcha.
nice. That sounds cool. I think we'd be open to that, having some joint thing.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah,
that'd be cool. So I guess we are out of time now for your first visit to the podcast. So maybe before we go, Arpit, you can tell people how they can find your app and find out what you're up to and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So the app has a really simple URL, GroceryTimer.app. Go check it out. There's a feedback link in the settings. I'd love to hear more. It's always gratifying to hear somebody's using it and has some opinion on it. But I've done enough side projects that's like crickets and nobody uses it. Like, all right, that was fun. And then I'm pretty active on Twitter. So twitter.com/ARPIT Arpit. And come out, say hi, and come to GDG Philadelphia if you're interested. We're all virtual, so it doesn't even have to be in Philadelphia, but you get bonus points for being in Philly. But yeah, come on down.
Yeah, that was you said to go to GDG Philadelphia on Twitter as the entry point for that group, right?
All right. Well, that is another episode of Philly Coco Presents Side Project Spotlight. You can find us at phillycoco.org, and all the links are there. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Don't eat your spinach. It's probably liquid now.